That's just the way it is in life. That's how life goes. That's how life goes. That's how life goes.
Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life. Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life.
Still you know I always be here. Still you know I always do this. Still you know I treat you fair. You have my word. No, I'm only sure I got to care. Just a touch of fears. Mine is just the blood. Don't call me immature. I'm just trying to free my mind. Oh, that's how life goes. That's how life goes.
Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life. Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life.
Check, baby, check, 1, 2. I say, check, baby, check, 1, 2. I say, check, baby, check, 1, 2. I say, check, baby, check, 1, 2. Be what you wanna be in this economy. Why you tryna bother me? Aiming for my goals, ain't no apology. I believe in universe.
Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life. Know that I still love life, even though it's hard. Love life.
It's going fantastic. Nice to finally meet you face to face.
Yeah, yeah. Nice to meet you as well. So, did you ever get a chance to send the stuff I wanted?
Sorry?
Did you get a chance to send the things, the links, and
Yes.
for the show?
Yes. I emailed you the 2 photos as you asked earlier today.
Okay. All right,
Yes.
man. Yeah. Jump right into this, man. Tell us your name and where were you from? Where were you born and raised?
So my full name is Tristan Kapp, and I was born in South Africa, raised in Centurion, which is a small town just outside of Pretoria, which then Pretoria is a few kilometers away from Johannesburg, which is the main capital. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, South Africa is the only country with 2 capitals. Or is that Japan? I can't remember now. But yeah, anyway, so I was born in this little place here. Went to school here, basically in my immediate environment, primary school, high school, everything happened here. So yeah, this is where I'm born and raised. They say it takes a village to raise a child. They've never been more right in their, it's an African proverb, and they've never been more right.
Oh, tell me about your family. You have any brothers and sisters, any siblings?
Yes, I have one sister. She's 2 years younger than me. She's 22 now this year. She's turning 22 years. she studies education, foundation phase. And I have a mother, a single mother. She's a communications specialist working for an insurance company in South Africa called Momentum. And then I also have my father, but he stays in Cape Town, unfortunately, because they divorced when I was 11, I think. So yeah, my mother has been raising myself and my sister single. My dad's a painter. He paints for a hobby. He's currently unemployed, but he stays with my stepmother and my stepsister in Strand in the Western Cape.
You said Cape Town?
Yes.
What is that abbreviation?
No. It's not an abbreviation. It's the actual city. So we've got 4 provinces in South Africa. There is the provinces are similar to states, like you have in the US. So we've got obviously Gauteng, which is where I'm staying, and then we've got the Northwest, which is about 2 hours away from here. Then we've got Durban, or rather KwaZulu-Natal, which is basically below the continent. And then we've got the Western Cape, or rather the Northern Cape, which is there about on the top, which is basically the Cape in general. And it is then divided into the Northern Cape, the Western Cape, the Southern Cape, and then the Eastern Cape.
Tell me, what is life like there?
Well, that's a very, yeah.
Yeah, well, let me ask first, how old are you?
I am 24 this year. Well, I'm turning 24 this year, August.
Okay, so do you guys have a good nightlife there, or what's some of the things you do to with friends and everything to have a good time there?
Well, usually we go out for drinks around a few bars here, but unfortunately, due to lockdown, my finances have taken a huge hit because I was a professional violinist. So I played at events and weddings and functions. But unfortunately, due to the lockdown in South Africa, things have, not been very great. However, I've heard that lockdown regulations in South Africa, where we are currently, we are at level 3. So that means we have limited movement and limited social engagements. So we can only gather outside of our own private spaces. And that about, sums up the social life. But currently under our level 3 lockdown, we are not permitted social activities and stuff like that yet, because of the infection surging. And now, obviously, I've heard that there's a new coronavirus variant in New York, the South African variant. Yeah. So, but in general, life in South Africa is pretty decent. I have to acknowledge that I have had a really wonderful life thus far. Although I have had my experiences with the crime in South Africa. So that's currently the basic problem. We have a lack of infrastructure and we have a lack of education. And obviously we have the highest, we have a record high unemployment rate currently in South Africa. Youth unemployment, I think, is now reached 42%, if I'm not mistaken. But that's due to the fact that the minimum loans have raised as well. So besides that, things are pretty decent. As I said, the crime rate is quite high. I personally went through a stabbing in 2018 where I was stabbed for my cell phone while walking home. So, that's a story and a half. I was stabbed about 9 times.
Stabbed 9 times?
Yes, in the torso area. And I was in the ICU, intensive care unit, for 3 days after that, and then 2 further days in hospital until I was released. So that was a quite harrowing experience, but that is something, I mean, that's not nothing compared to what people go through on a general basis in my area. We stay in what we call a security estate, which is basically, I mean, just imagine the Capitol Hill gates and stuff times 10. So that's what we go through on a daily basis. And we have these various security estates because of the fact that we have such a high crime rate. However, I am one of the lucky few. We've bought one of the oldest, smaller properties. So we've got basically a complex, which is a bunch of 8 houses inside of this security estate. And it's also much cheaper. So we don't live in a mansion, which is what people expect when they hear the word security estate. But nevertheless, other people aren't that lucky. So they have other houses that have like high walls and a lot of electric fences. And we have a community policing quorum, basically, because of the fact that our national police aren't worth nothing. So basically because of the fact that they can't do anything. Because of the fact also they are overwhelmed with work because of the high crime rate. But there is basically a difference in how some people stay in South Africa. For example, we've got the townships, which makes up a broader spectrum of our population. We have I'd say a 90% Black population, plus or minus, but we are a majority African population. And then white people are at 10%. But in general, you know, the poorest of our population are obviously the African people, because of the fact that they do not have, because of apartheid, they did not have the same abilities or accessibility to certain educative factors and environments as I have today. But luckily, due to implemented things and due to financial aids helping poor African students, we've got a lot of those things that help them now today to enable them to access quality education. So that's brilliant. But yeah, on the other hand, we've got a lot of corruption as well. So we've got a lot of corrupt politicians, which is, I think, if we terminalize it politically, it would be despotism. And of course, nepotism as well, where they give each other positions in parliament because of the fact that there is still an inherent tribalism or a tribal mindset in the African political system. We've got the Zulus, we've got the Xhosas, we've got the Vendas and the Tswanas, and they all come from different tribes. We're talking about pre-colonialism now. And obviously their tribalistic mindsets also influence the way they conduct politics. And unfortunately, due to our high or our history of colonialism and apartheid, we obviously have to deal with this, I would say, corruption today, because of the fact that that is the life basically that was that serves as a repercussion of what happened during apartheid colonialism.
Oh, so you are you're a writer. You do. I read a couple. I read some of your work. It's pretty good.
Oh. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let me ask you, how, coming off of Trump, how was America viewed by people, by you guys,
Well, the general population, the African population, I don't think they care about Trump necessarily. But I feel that the white population in South Africa, who are more conservative and generally Christian, my area especially, there's a lot of conservative Christians here. And they see Trump as a sort of hero. So the whole current situation especially is that in South Africa, we experience a phenomenon called farm murders. But unfortunately, there's a bit of stigmatism and disinformation regarding the phenomenon. And that is that it is a racial and ethnic war, which is not at all, what it is. It's merely a product of crime. So in South Africa, because of our socioeconomic status, because of the fact that we are, we've got a low GDP, obviously that produces crime. Because of the fact that the possibilities through education and through job opportunities aren't enough to get people qualified to do certain jobs. Thus, there are a lot of qualified jobs available, but there are less qualified people to do them. And to avoid the quality of the job going down the drain, obviously we have to improve the education, which is not currently happening. So as I said earlier, we don't have infrastructure. And this corroborates to the whole narrative of corruption and how white South Africans believe corruption occurs. And we believe, and well, not me, because I believe that it is a very unhealthy perspective to view Trump as a hero. But there are people, white people, Afrikaans-speaking individuals like myself, who view Trump as a sort of hero who can save them from these farm murders, whom they perceive, or what they perceive as a threat against their very existence. So the narratives in America among white people, as I've seen it, and I've perceived it, is not dissimilar to what we perceive as white South Africans. Because of the fact that there's a sort of synergy. I also find that basically politically, what happens in America amongst the white people always finds a way to flush over in South Africa, as I said in my article. So I do find that that's a problem. And of course, there is a lot of inherent racism still in South Africa because of Trump. So because Trump is in power, that gave certain white people in South Africa a sort of predisposition to be racist or to be, even homophobic. But those people are individually people who are not prone to creative or complex thought patterns. And that is the unfortunate reality, because they are usually not necessarily educated to the extent that what people would perceive as educated. I think I spoke to a friend recently who said that there was a research poll published some time ago that perceived or defined education as people with a university or college degree, which a lot of them don't have. And I'm talking now of the boomer generation, the older generation. However, there are some young people as well who suffer from this and who still believe that there is a threat against the lives of white people. But statistically, if you compare it to what happens in townships, it's nothing. It's a droplet in the bucket. Because of the fact that in townships they've got mob justice, and of course they've got a higher femicide in townships and in rural areas, because of the fact of, like I said, low education and high crime rate, which is prevalent in townships. So there's a lot more crime happening in townships than on farms, but generally farms are targeted because they are soft targets, because they are generally elderly people that stay there, and they are tortured in the most horrific of ways. So I do not demean the validity of the struggle, but I find that it's used as a platform for white South Africans to exert a sort of racist narrative against black South Africans. But the reality of the thing is, it's not just the white farmers being affected. There are black farm owners as well who suffer from this.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that.
Yes.
Farmers' lives matter. I never heard that's going on there.
Yes, well, that was a while ago. It was the movement that emerged, and it's quite ironic that South Africans, white South Africans especially, we've got a term called white privilege, and I think it's also a term in America as well.
Oh yeah.
But in South Africa, we've got this sense of white privilege, and I have it as well. We all have it. It's just the concept of being aware of it and allocating that resources to enrich the public through knowledge or through helping people or stuff like that. But white privilege in South Africa forms a different, I'd say, flavor. because then again, it's more intertwined with racism and bigotry. Because of the fact that I have found that in recent years, when white South Africans are unhappy about something, people have joked and said they create a 3-syllable movement, which is basically Farmers' Lives Matters. Or recently, there's been another one, We Are More, where they protested the beaches because the beaches were closed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they were unhappy because the beaches are closed, yet people are starving from hunger. And they, promote countless disinformation about mask wearing and stuff like that. So you understand the whole archetype of white privilege, of people who don't, or rather there's a term that explains it perfectly. It's conservatives loudly not understanding things. And basically they created these movements in order to do something, but it's not doing anything. They merely design t-shirts or a nice logo and then it stays on Facebook afterwards. So they don't really achieve anything. But recently one of these movements, which is not similar to the Farmers' Lives Matters movement, but in some ways originate from the same group, marched a protest to our Capitol building, which was quite similar to what happened at Capitol Hill, although not as violent. Just a bunch of ladies and what they call Karens or Brendas marching up to a Capitol Hill with their typical hairstyles, because they are unhappy about because they don't enjoy the same privilege they do anymore. Yeah.
So with the Farmers' Lives Matter, that kind of shocked me because farmers, of course, are very in everywhere are very important. The crops, everything that they do, that it feeds the masses. So
absolutely.
Why would they have any kind of drama coming their way when they are so very important to feeding the people, supplying
absolutely.
the food chains and everything? Where did that go wrong?
You see, I think it's not necessarily. See, people misunderstand the whole thing because of the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of white people, especially, felt that Black people or Black Lives Matter negates the validity of other lives, which is utter nonsense. It doesn't. Right. It merely conveys a historical narrative that has been imminent since the earliest times of colonialism, and that comes with the oppression of African people. And believe it or not, a lot of African people, especially in the African countries, are still in an oppressive state because of pre-colonial narratives that still that still persist. But in the end, the Farmers' Lives Matters movement, it's not necessarily about them going wrong. Again, I said earlier, it's merely a product of our own crime rates. If you read, there's a phenomenon called white genocide, and there was an article written on Pulitzer, which I read a while ago, which really provides some intensive and brilliant research on the division of land in South Africa. And I think this is the current friction in South Africa, which makes white people think that they are being targeted because Black people want their land, which of course is propagated by certain political movements. So in South Africa, we've got a different political system. We've got more than one political party, not just in America. We've got the Democrats and the Republicans. So in South Africa, the three dominant parties currently are the Economic Freedom Fighters, and they are a bit of a communist party. Then we've got the Democratic Alliance, which again is in my experience, more of a white supremacist, or not white supremacist, but rather whites only club, rather, as they've been hailed in the media. And then there is the ANC, which is the current ruling party, and they've had a successive monopoly over politics ever since the end of apartheid. So obviously there's this dominant narrative of white people being attacked on their farms. But obviously there are elderly people on these farms. So again, it's not the farms per se that are being attacked. It's purely the environments in which these farms are. They are secluded. They have vast amounts of land, and farms are kilometers apart from each other. So farms are quite large in South Africa, and so, therefore, yeah.
Well, go ahead, finish.
Oh, so farms are quite large, and therefore it makes it difficult for neighboring farms to assist when there's an immediate emergency. But yeah, that's really what I wanted to conclude with.
So you do agree and understand what the Black Lives Matter
absolutely
movement. Yeah, because
absolutely.
Just with the police brutality and just all kind of stuff. I remember
yes
9/11. After 9/11, maybe the next few 2, 3, 4 months after 9/11, it's probably the safest I've ever felt as far as not worrying about a police officer harassing me just because of how I look. I was able to drive very comfortably, because it seemed like the focus was on another group of people because of what happened. But that's all it is, man. And I thank you for understanding that.
Yeah, no, I think my context allows me to understand the struggles of Black people a lot. Because of the fact that in my university, while I was doing my master's degree last year, I've had the most riveting conversations with African students. And I've believed that, especially when it comes to issues that don't affect me, I believe that I should rather listen to those whom it is affecting, rather than my own preconceived biases. And obviously, I might be labeled by some as a libtard or someone who's a leftist or a Democrat, just because of the fact that I entertain the policies and the narratives that promote transformation as well as progression. Because I believe that a lot of the people who entertain narratives like Farmers' Life Matters or White Lives Matter or stuff like that, they are actually stagnating society, and they are unfortunately the individuals who procreate the most. So that is the unfortunate thing that we struggle with in society. And I believe that being a loud voice and standing with the people who are suffering the most is usually the wisest choice. I don't negate the suffering of others through standing with one or, equating solidarity with one group. I just have a lack of sympathy for racists, for example. And that is the current context that we South Africans find ourselves in. And therefore, as I'm seeing a lot of white people react to the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not a pretty hard concept to grasp. I mean, if you don't directly say that only Black Lives Matter, that doesn't, that obviously is a whole different narrative. But saying Black Lives Matter in the sense of showing the attention or moving the magnifying glass to these oppressed people or the narratives that they suffer from is obviously not negating the other people. It's just shifting the focus a bit for now. It's not saying that the other lives don't matter. It just moves the focus a bit and then encourages the ills of society within this focal point to be addressed.
I interviewed a hip hop artist that I know, and he had an interesting response to this question. I asked him, because Trump is gone now. I asked him, how do you feel about Biden and Harris now? And he said, they're all the same guy. And I thought that was a very interesting response. I guess seeing that no matter who you put in that seat, whether it's Obama, whether it's Trump or Bush, they're all the same person. They're all going to have they all could do only so much, and there's an agenda. There's secrets that the government is hiding from its people. It's all the same guy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a very interesting statement. Also, I think it's a very dangerous statement.
Okay.
Because of the fact that, equating these presidents as the same person negates the fact that they have their unique politics. Obviously, you cannot equate Barack Obama with Donald Trump.
Right.
Barack Obama was a lot more educated and a lot better well-spoken than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Who used media to traverse his whole narrative, who basically was an attention whore for all intents and purposes. And that's how he made his presidency work, because he appealed to the masses in a certain way that they have never been appealed to before, because he said all the things that they are afraid to say in society, because what they're in fact thinking and saying is toxic and it's not contributing to the healthy betterment of society. But in the end, I think that although I'm a bit skeptical about Biden, one would say, merely because of his age, I think that his heart is in the right place. And I think his strategy in choosing Harris for his running mates is fantastic. I think it's amazing to see a South Asian and African American woman in a political seat. I mean, this has not happened in South Africa in a presidential sense, but we do have female ministers, obviously, as you do too, but there's never been a female vice president in South Africa. So I definitely think that is a massive stride towards progression, and I think that perhaps that Kamala Harris might keep Joe Biden down to earth. Because of the fact that Joe Biden is obviously the ideal candidate. He's male and he's white. So that obviously makes him no different from the previous presidents, except Barack Obama, who is definitely a cut above the rest. But yeah, I think that Trump is not, I don't, even when I watched the politics unfolding during last year, especially when Trump had his highlights and stuff, I felt that, is this really presidential character? Can I even empathize with an American who refuses or who calls this guy president? Because I don't think that his behavior was professional or logical in any way, shape or form, because of the fact that obviously there is, even within business, there is a certain professionality that you have to conduct. And being chief of state or the president of the United States is an office that supersedes all offices. So imagine being a CEO of a company and being a CEO of an entire country. That is something completely different. And I feel that the professionalism that he displayed is tragic, and I think it perhaps tainted the Oval Office and the way that it has been presented. I mean, obviously the previous presidents had their mistakes in the history of presidency, and they were not perfect because they're human. However, I do believe that Trump was absolutely a complete sycophant, if I may say so.
You mentioned Biden's age, and I know I've heard age like when it comes to politicians when they talk about the Pope, when he was kind of old and everything. Do you think that politicians or people like the Pope or people in power become a little less effective as they get on in age, and that they should give the seat up to someone a little younger or whatever?
Not necessarily, not in that sense. Well, rather, let me answer this way. I think it's a yes and no type of thing. Because yes, because of the fact that obviously the generation carries its predispositions with it. Obviously, when a person becomes older, the more set in their ways they are.
Yeah.
However, when someone is younger, the more malleable they become. So I think it's both constructs have their positives and negatives. Obviously, I think that older people perhaps are less corruptible, perhaps, although that is also not true, seeing as though a lot of the politicians in our country, for example, are rather middle-aged, but they are quite able to be corrupt. However, I think that younger generations, for example, have a fervor and a bigger energy level than older presidents have. But I actually read about why presidents of the United States are so old, or why they're becoming so old. It's because of the generational thing of the voters voting for them. I think that a lot of young people are losing faith in politics because of the fact of all the mistakes that generation boomers have made before us. So I think that the problem that we face is the mere factor that we need to converge the two. I think that there needs to perhaps be a mix. And I'm no expert politician, so I do not have the faintest idea of how complex politics are. Even though I am outspoken about certain issues, but they are more on a social level than on a political level. I don't think I'd ever be able to navigate the complexities of political policies, stuff like that.
Right.
But I do think that it's healthy to have a generational balance in parliament because of the fact that there's the wisdom of the older people, and then there is the fervor and the energy towards progression from the younger people. And yeah, I think that is, what's necessary. And of course, women. I think that women are less corruptible than men. So I think if we had more female leaders, for example, like I've had the privilege of meeting Angela Merkel before, and I was quite impressed by her demeanor and how she conducts herself. And then, of course, you've got the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who is absolutely brilliant and very down-to-earth woman. So I definitely think perhaps that it's necessary to have a younger, perhaps middle-aged female as a leader in politics. And that's why I think I have such an enormous respect for Kamala Harris, because she knows the struggles of people of her own cultural background, because she's worked through that, she's developed through that, and she's lived through that. And she's obviously made a lot of, from that.
I tend to believe that 4 years from now, we're going to have both the two top seats will be women. What about that?
Yeah, that might be a very, very accurate speculation. But yeah, I think that American politics are definitely complex, but I think they are a lot more civilized than South African politics. Because if you go on, for example, YouTube, and you look at the debates in South Africa, you've got a lot of infighting. The other day, there was a video on TikTok where one of the individuals in parliament started fighting with the other one just because they disagree. But it's quite entertaining. I'll have you know, it's quite entertaining watching them go at each other. Because yeah, they can be quite raucous or ruckus. It's like, no, that's not the correct word, but they can be quite volatile. That's the correct word I'm trying to look for. Yeah.
What inspired you to be a writer and a blogger?
Well, I think it was because of university. So I started in my undergraduate career with an assignment. We had to create our own blog and write stuff, obviously to protect our, not protect, but develop our academic writing skills. And I think that what convinced me was the passion I had for changing things through writing. And a lot of people have especially told me that I not only have a gift of the gab, but I can write well as well. So quite similar to your background, you had a passion for literature and you enjoyed writing. And obviously I'm not as talented as you, so I can't write songs, but I can write poetry, which other people can then notate. So it's definitely a passion, and I think it was facilitated through academia, and it made me pursue other avenues. For example, I've be notified today by my university that I've got a bursary to pursue my doctoral studies this year, which is absolutely amazing, because it's been a lifelong dream of mine to obtain a PhD before the age of 30. That's my biggest dream, because of the fact that it comes from a perspective of where I wasn't listened to when I was younger, from people in high positions. So I've always felt that if I attain that highest position, maybe I can have a voice to change things for the better. Obviously within my expertise and field of reference.
Tell me about the first, your first ever project you wrote, and what was it about?
I think it was about a friend I used to have at university. Although I can't accept
Pretoria, right?
Yes, University of Pretoria. That's when I went to my first year of university, I only met one friend. And we used to have the most riveting conversations about things that matter, and about how we can use our future academic paths to change the world and do research that can benefit people in some way, shape, or form. And I remember writing an article about him, about our relationship and how our fields coincide, about how we share the same passions, about how we convey that. Obviously, I've deleted a lot of the older things I've written on my blog because of the fact that they were just poorly written. And of course that I grew in intellectuality, in the sense of that I saw that I could put things in a more better way. So I believe that also my biggest mistake was when I started blogging was that I was very aggressive. I got very emotional and I attacked people personally, which was just a glorified Facebook post. So obviously I had to refine it more. And I think that's a skill that academia taught me, to be more objective in my writing, to perhaps encompass a bird's eye view, while similarly conveying the narrative or the end point of the story which you want to convey. So obviously you have to take people into the journey, which I didn't take into consideration earlier. But as my mother is a communications professional, she obviously gave me a lot of tips and said, listen, style your topics like this. Don't write this way. Don't use such language. Rather use words that are less aggressive or less confrontational. So she told me, like, if you want to go into academia, you have to sound like an academic.
You were brought up in church, right?
Yes, I was raised Christian,
yes.
Although I am not Christian currently.
You something you wrote that was kind of interesting. Used to color in church, color in the heroes or the people of the Bible, like Joshua and Noah, Jesus.
Yes.
What color?
When I don't necessarily remember, but I think the drawings were not necessarily focused on the heroes of the Bible. But I think from a young age, I was fascinated with Christ as a martyr. And that's what motivated me to go and study theology in the first place. Because as I understood the history more, I understood the figure of Jesus and came to find him as a social warrior, someone who fought for the oppressed. And I think that's what perhaps fascinated me with him as a child, the influence he had, the fact that he could be hailed as a hero to the people whom he saved, obviously. And obviously to such a point where he fought against the Roman Empire and the oppressive nature they had towards his people, that he ended up being stabbed in the back and hung on a cross, which I thought was quite the epitome of martyrdom and I don't think that he ever uttered a single complaint. I don't think he ever complained about what he had to fight for. And I think that is one of the most admirable things and one of the most admirable qualities anyone can embody. And I think that's what quite made me look up to him. But I was disillusioned later because of the fact that the church didn't share my views with regard to that. The churches in South Africa were more focused on making money than they were about helping people. And they were more focused on propagating certain toxic doctrines than they were obviously on prioritizing the needs and wants of their congregants, which resulted in me being kicked out of a lot of churches because of the fact that I stood for inclusion, the fact that I wanted a lot of white churches, especially the dominant church in South Africa, which I was actually a training minister at some stage, the Dutch Reformed Church. They were one of the biggest propagators of racism and colonialism in South Africa. They were the creators of the apartheid legislation. And when they had the chance to sign a confession, which is today known as the Belhar Confession, which apologized profusely for what happened and basically would pave the way for reconciliation, they never signed it because of the fact that they were too hesitant in the repercussions that would follow. Because of the fact that a lot of the Dutch Reformed ministers were the individuals who propagated and who walked hand in hand with the state towards propagating racism and segregation in South Africa. Similar to what happened with Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael and the Black Power movement. I learned about that in high school, and that also illustrated my perspective about how colonialism and how a lot of Christianity influenced a lot of the narratives that oppress African people today. And one of the most powerful quotes that changed my life, and I included it in my article, was the one of Desmond Tutu, which is a clerical member, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who's the, I think, Archbishop of South Africa, or Africa, I think. He said that when the white people came to Africa, that they had the Bible and we had the land. Then they said, let us pray. And when we closed our eyes, we had the Bible and they had the land. And I found that was very profound. And obviously it's a very unpopular statement, but that motivated me to fight for inclusion in the church, not just for people of color, because of the fact that I would not lie when I say that a lot of the churches in South Africa still remain segregated, especially a lot of the Afrikaans churches, because of the fact that they still do not want to compromise linguistically to accommodate other people, especially people of color, because of the fact that there's still this rooted narrative of racism in a lot of the African church narratives or South African Afrikaans church narratives. Which obviously propagates pro-Trumpism and conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what basically got me kicked out, as well as the fact that I found worthiness in standing up for LGBTQ rights. I am currently a founder and manager of an organization in South Africa called Anti-Homophobia South Africa, where I fight for LGBTQ rights. And it's also my field of speciality, sexuality and spirituality. And it's something I aim to specialize in for my doctorate as well.
You're part of the community?
Yes. Well, no, not me personally, but I'm an ally of the LGBTQ community. So I'm a straight ally of the LGBTQ community.
You know, here, I know here in certain parts, some of those members still are attacked and beaten and everything because of their lifestyle. And is that prevalent there as well?
Yes, in South Africa, because of the dominant Christian narrative, it was actually one story of a friend of mine that went to school with me in primary school that I encountered. Well, primary school in South Africa is the equivalent of elementary school in America. So this girl I went to with in elementary school, or rather primary school, I met again at university. And she told me that she came out as gay to her mother. And her mother immediately wanted to kick her out of her house. She wanted to disown her. She took her away from the kids where she was working with at churches because of the fact that her mother was afraid she might influence the kids to become gay, which was very, very sad. And this is not the only story I've heard. I've heard so many stories of friends of mine. I recently had a client. I'm also a wellness counselor. So I do counseling professionally for people of the LGBTQ community, as well as people who are ostracized for who they are. And this one particular client I had hadn't even told his parents that he was gay and that he was living with another man. So he was so afraid that they might kick him out and disown him that he just kept silent. And what I wanted to do was I facilitated a journey with him to create a comfortability where he can feel comfortable with not only who he is, but also who he wants to be, and also face the courage of the backlash of coming to his parents, because of the fact that there's this narrative that says blood is thicker than water. But in a lot of instances, when it comes to toxic people, not necessarily. It's not absolute. And obviously, when people do not accept you for who you are, you don't have to entertain them in your life.
You know, one of your pieces or something pertaining to we are not just a piece of meat, something like that. You know what I'm talking about? One of your blogs. That was
I was thinking, oh yes. That was about gender, about how it was not binary, and it's something that I've really, before I write about something like that, I usually just educate myself. And I go to people to whom this affects immensely, because all my blog articles that I write, they come from a story that I've had in a conversation with people that motivated me. So I cannot write research or anything if they are not motivated by a story of either marginalization or ostracism. And so this, not just pieces of meat, I've been increasingly difficult with myself, because I want to understand what it means to be transgendered or to go and do therapy and stuff like that. And I've been equated with a term called gendered body dysmorphia, as well as gender dysphoria. So body dysmorphia is becoming disillusioned with how your body looks due to obviously trauma and bullying and stuff like that. And then gender dysphoria is being confused with your gender outfit. And that's what fascinated me the most about this discourse. I had never considered that there are so many exceptions to the rule, and that when it comes to biology, that, you know, even though we might consider even biology as binary, that there are still even chromosomal exceptions to the rule that might say that no, this person is neither male nor female, or he's just a mixture of the two, or whatever. Right. And that's the glory of science. The things that I have perceived as absolute just becomes relative. And I think that it's a huge opportunity for creativity. And obviously when it comes to the fact that they're not just pieces of meat, it was a Facebook article that my friend posted, and she was very angry at a lot of people judging other people or not, you know, being able to consider themselves in an appropriate stance where they can accept the fact that there are more than two genders. And obviously in our language, we don't have a distinguishing factor between sex and biology, because sex to us in our language means intercourse, whereas in English there is the common denominator, which is obviously biological sex as opposed to coitus, and obviously then the gender, which is then a different perspective altogether. So she consistently wrote a post on her profile where she was extremely angry about people not understanding this narrative. And I thought, well, allow me to be the thought leader, because I've got a following, and people, I think they want to listen to me occasionally. Whether it's by choice or not is debatable. But I thought that maybe I can write an article about that and use it to reference a future Facebook post or something, to shed light on the discussion and maybe change how people perceive these people, and perhaps break open the doors of progression, which I think South Africa is really far behind on, even though our legislation and our constitutions are the best in the world. I think the people have a long way to go.
We talk about freedom of speech, and I know you have problems, I guess, with you speaking out as far as with some of the churches. I've done some songs, I guess, that had some response, and I've seen you've seen groups like Public Enemy, NWA, groups here, rap groups that have had the police threaten them. You don't perform this a certain song at your concert, or it's going to be repercussions. How do you deal with this? Because I know you seem to be very straightforward with your thoughts and everything. Do you really get outside of the churches that you talk about? You really get a lot of pressure sometimes for your stand?
Yes, unfortunately, in South Africa, due to the narratives that I uphold, I'm not very popular, and the community that I'm in is rather small. So whenever something happens, the media knows about it, and I have been, because of the stuff that I stood for, I have been quite prevalent in the media, which obviously leads to a lot of misperceptions about who I am. But in general, I have had death threats. I have had people come up to my house and take pictures and harass me. So I've had people threaten me with death, and I've heard it's been rough. It's been terrible. And also, especially during the homosexuality debate, when I fought against the Dutch Reformed Church, I was also quite infamous about that, because they associated my faculty, which is one of the key faculties that is one of the strongholds rather of the Dutch Reformed Church. But one of the amazing gifts that the University of Pretoria's Faculty of Theology and Religion gave me was critical thought, because unlike the other faculties, they are the oldest in the country, one of the oldest. The other one is in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape. And what they focused on was critical thought and the stimulation of academic narratives, instead of seminarians or seminaries doing Bible-based lectures. So a lot of the stuff and the content that they had were recent scientific developments, historical things, and stuff like that, which contributed to a lot of my mindset. So in essence, whether they like it or not, they made me who I am today. And of course, when you have to be a thought leader in certain aspects, I believe a certain bluntness is necessary. Yeah. And despite the death threats I have gotten more people who came to me and said, thank you for being brave enough to speak about these issues. And I've never really thought about it that way. Every time someone approaches me with that, I'm like, wow, people actually listen to what I say, or people actually read my stuff. So most of the time, I think what I'm saying and what I'm doing is merely showing to people my development, and basically audibly giving them a written biography of what I'm going through, and perhaps take them with me on that journey, so as to contribute to the betterment of society.
Why don't you start podcasting?
I've thought about that. I have, but you see, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I am very tantamount. Well, I have this tendency to focus on every single detail. So the thing that I produced has to be perfect. And obviously in writing, I can edit it better. And obviously go back and then edit it. With regards to audio and video, for example, I don't have that software. But it's definitely something that I have considered very, very strongly. I have thought about you know, entertaining different discussions with people from different backgrounds, like you do, which I was completely baffled when you approached me. This person with such a lot of influence, you know, wanting to have a discussion with someone like me was really something that I looked up to, and it's also something that I aim to facilitate when I have the finances and obviously the facilities. So yeah, the thing of being a student now full time is that academia, I have to make a choice: either make money, which is either way not going to happen because of my controversiality in general life. But through academia, there is the opportunity to make money as well as to be controversial within certain bounds. So there's a tolerance in academia for a lot of things, which general society is not yet ready for. But yeah, so I think someone has to clean up the mess. I think that Nietzsche wrote a book called Die Fröhliche Wissenschaft, which is German for the joyful wisdom, or rather the gay science, as they pronounce it. But and he wrote this parable of the madman, where this is the narrative of a guy walking with a lantern, asking, "Where is God?" And the people laugh at him and ridicule him and say, "Have you lost him? Has he lost his way like a child? Has he gone away on holiday, or is he sleeping?" So they mocked him, this lantern bearer who's asking, "Where is God?" or "Where is God?" And eventually he drops his lantern and he says, "God is dead and we have killed him. Have you not smelt yet the divine decomposition? For gods to decompose." It's a brilliant piece of poetic philosophy in which the conveyance is not literally saying that God is being killed, as in the crucifixion, as most people would misconstrue it. But it's merely explaining how society has killed the ideals that God was supposed to represent. And I explained that in another article on my blog, which is also titled the same as God is Dead. So basically conveying the concept of teaching people to separate the idea from the identity. When you find something that causes cognitive dissonance in your mind, do not attack the person, attack the identity, expose the logical fallacies within the idea, because then you're contributing to thought leadership instead of breaking down the other person. So excellent. Yeah.
You man, you are brilliant, man. We're gonna have you on again. I know my radio co-host, Miss Deborah Gillespie. Miss Deborah Gillespie, my radio co-host, I know she's gonna really flip when she hear this. So she's gonna want to have you on our show. I do 2 radio shows here in Milwaukee with her. She's founder of Mothers Against Gun Violence. She lost her son years ago to gun violence.
Yeah, so that's also a very big passion of mine, because 90% of the clients I work with in my counseling practice are abused women, sexually abused women. And it's also a topic that I am exceptionally passionate about, because rape and femicide and violence against women in South Africa it's one of the biggest problems we face. Like the other day, there was an individual, a man, who paid a killer 700,000 rand, which I think is about the equivalent to $7,000 or $70,000. I can't remember the exact currency, but he paid this guy to go and kill the mother of his unborn child because she was pregnant with his child.
I'm glad they caught him. They caught him, right? He got caught up.
Yeah,
I'm glad
they caught him. Yes, they did. But unfortunately, there are a lot of girls and ladies in the township and the rural areas that aren't as lucky, and whose bodies are found. But it's merely one of these stories that stand out in the media. But 90% of the unheard stories I have to hear, for example, when I have my what's it called? My clients who confess to me about being raped and being sexually abused, which is something it definitely shakes me as a man, because of the fact that as a man, I've never understood how that happens and how the processes of grooming worked until I've experienced it firsthand within these stories that women portray. And especially with regards to the narratives of that, I believe that all of us men are capable of such barbarity. And being aware of it makes us, I wouldn't say better, but different. It makes us, because we are aware of our own monstrosity, I believe it makes us more acute to the fact that we can be dangerous. But in being aware of it makes us not dangerous, if that makes sense.
Right. We got like maybe 10 minutes left, so I want to get through this last questions kind of quick. Sex trafficking.
Yes.
Is that's big there as well?
Definitely. Human trafficking, sex trafficking is also very prevalent in South Africa. For example, we've got Facebook jobs, where people apply on jobs. Yes, so it's a platform on Facebook where people can apply for jobs in South Africa. I don't know if it's worldwide, but it's definitely a thing in South Africa. But there's a lot of job scammers on it, where, for example, they give you an address and say, this is the number you should WhatsApp to, or to message to get to this opportunity. This is the address. This is where you should go. Bring a photo of your ID, this personal information, and then people disappear like that. But yeah, it's definitely a very big problem in South Africa.
If you could sit down and have dinner, dinner and a conversation with 3 people, dead or alive, could be anyone, who would you want to sit down and talk with?
Oh, that's hard. That's very hard. But I definitely think the man who infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan, I can't remember his name, the police officer, the African police officer, African-American police officer. There was a movie about him on Netflix. I definitely want to have a dinner with him. And then second of all, definitely Kamala Harris. And then I think lastly, Nietzsche, because he was definitely one of the most influential thinkers who influenced my perspectives on life.
What's ahead for you in 2021?
Well, as I said, I've got news today that I got a bursary to I think it's like 120,000 Rand that was contributed to my studies out of the blue. That's now big. I can pursue my dream to obtain a doctorate and hopefully do a lot of groundbreaking things that would also contribute to people's lives in a more meaningful way. So I believe that also talking about stuff that matter, especially I've also been asked, quite interestingly enough, approached by a Dutch Reformed minister for also another interview which he wanted to do with me about my current perspectives and how it coincides with his controversial discussions that he wants to facilitate. So yeah, it's definitely that. And also I believe that my goals in 2021 is a bit to mature more and not engage in meaningless fights, but win wars and rather lose battles, especially on Facebook, and more contribute to engaging with people from a lot of different backgrounds, to learn from them as well, because that's one of the greatest gifts I've managed to embrace, is the gift of learning.
Well, Tristan, we're both out here trying to make a difference, man, and I think you give me way too much credit, man. We feel blessed of talking to you today and have had you on, man, and so you've been a great interview person, man, and we look forward to having you again. I know we're gonna have you again very soon.
I appreciate this opportunity, Leroy. It's absolutely fascinating and wonderful to have you as well, and have a mentor like you who've inspired so many young people to embrace their dreams as well. I've seen a lot of and listened to a few of the stuff that you've done as well in the past, and I'm absolutely very impressed with what you're doing as well. So I think that you're making a difference, and I look up to you for that, and I hope to one day be able to do what you are doing now as well.
You will. Just hang on a second. I'm gonna stop the recording. I'm gonna talk to you for a second off mic. But we've been talking with Tristan Kapp. Man,
yeah.
You are an extraordinary young man, man. So thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it.